We have zero ways to tell if someone is actually dead or alive. Once we declare someone is dead, there's a real chance that we could be completely wrong. And I am not talking in a spiritual or religious way. I meant that we could be wrong according to the actual instruments hooked up to that patient's body. I want to explain why, because once anyone understands this, they won't think about death the same way again. Before 1960, death was simple. Heart stops, you're dead. There was no debate to have, because nothing existed that could argue with a stopped heart. That was just the physical reality doctors worked inside of, going back as far as medicine existed. Then in 1960, a team at Johns Hopkins, Cohenhoven, Jude, and Knickerbocker, I've got their papers somewhere in this stack, worked out that you could compress a person's chest from the outside and get their heart moving again. Around the same period, an anesthesiologist named Peter Safar combined that with mouth-to-mouth ventilation. Together, that became CPR. Within a few years, it spread through hospitals everywhere, and the line that had separated alive from dead for the entirety of human history quietly stopped being fixed. That created a problem nobody had prepared for. Ventilators could keep a body breathing indefinitely. Hearts could be restarted, but some patients never woke up. Their brains were gone, completely, permanently gone, while a machine kept their chest rising and falling. Hospitals were suddenly full of bodies that were warm, breathing, technically alive by every old standard, with nothing left behind the eyes. In 1968, a committee at Harvard sat down and tried to fix that. They wrote up a new category, brain death, no reflexes, no spontaneous breathing, no response to stimuli, irreversible coma. Meet those conditions and you could be declared dead, heartbeat or not. I keep coming back to what that actually means. For all of recorded history, death was something you could witness. After that report, it became something a committee defined on paper, and there's a detail from that report that doesn't get repeated enough. The same committee was also dealing with a growing demand for transplantable organs. The definition of death and the practical needs of the transplant program were never as separate as the official story makes it sound. That's already unsettling on its own. But it's not even the part that keeps me up. After brain death became the standard, doctors kept running into cases that shouldn't have been possible under it. Patients with no measurable brain activity, no pulse, dead by every criteria in the 1968 report, coming back and describing things. Not confusion. Not the kind of fragmented nonsense you'd expect from an oxygen-starved brain. Structured accounts. Watching their own resuscitation from somewhere above the bed, moving through something they each independently called a tunnel. For decades, the explanation was simple. Dying brain, misfiring neurons, meaningless static. That held up until 2013, when a researcher at the University of Michigan, Jimo Borjigin, ran an experiment on rats that I think about more than almost anything else in this pile of papers. She induced cardiac arrest and monitored their brains in real time, expecting to watch activity fade out. Instead, in the 30 seconds after the heart stopped, she recorded a massive surge in gamma wave activity, the same signature associated with focused conscious perception in a fully awake brain. In some measurements, it was stronger than anything recorded while the animals were alive and alert. The dying brain wasn't going dark. It was doing something that looked, on the instruments, like a spike of intense awareness. I remember exactly where I was when I first read that paper. It didn't prove the human accounts were real experiences, but it broke the lazy explanation completely. Something organized was happening in there, right at the point every medical document in the building would call the moment of death. That's what led to a larger study, Sam Parnia's AWARE study, running from 2008, published in 2014, followed by AWARE 2 in 2023. The design still strikes me as clever every time I think about it. Hospitals placed hidden images on shelves mounted high up, visible only from a vantage point near the ceiling, somewhere nobody lying flat in a bed could see them. If patients really were experiencing something like floating above their own bodies, one of them might describe an image that shouldn't have been visible to anyone. Nobody identified the images correctly. I want to be honest about that because it would be easy to leave it out. But something else came out of AWARE too that barely made it past the abstract. Some patients with no pulse, no brainstem reflexes, a completely flat reading by every clinical standard, later described lucid, structured awareness during the exact window they were considered clinically dead. And in at least one documented case, the monitors caught a spike of gamma activity during CPR from a brain that, according to the models we currently use, should not have been capable of producing anything at all. I don't think this proves an afterlife, and I get uneasy when people jump straight there because it's such an easy story to want to be true. What actually sits with me is quieter than that. It's the fact that the entire framework hospitals use right now to decide whether a person still exists has already been rewritten once within living memory, and it wasn't rewritten because we understood death better. It was rewritten because our tools for detecting life outran our ability to think through the consequences. There's an old experiment from a completely different field that I keep coming back to. Early 1960s, Stanley Milgram at Yale, ordinary people willing to follow instructions from someone in a lab coat, even while their own instincts were screaming that something was wrong. I think about that whenever I think about how quietly the world accepted the 1968 redefinition. Thousands of years of intuitive understanding about what it means for a person to die, replaced within a few years almost no public resistance because the people saying it wore white coats and worked in a building that made the claim sound settled. What actually stays with me after all this reading isn't any one study on its own. It's the shape underneath all of them. Every time the instruments got more sensitive, CPR, the ventilator, a hidden shelf above a hospital bed, the line marking death moved. Not disappeared, moved. Every single time. I don't have an answer for what that means. I'm not sure anyone currently has the tools to get one. Whether what these studies are catching right at that boundary is the edge of consciousness itself, or just the current edge of what our instruments happen to be able to measure, that's the part I haven't been able to put down.